What do introverts need to know about building a personal brand? That's what we'll be talking about on this episode of the StoryConnect podcast. My name is Andy Johns, your host with Pioneer, and I'm joined on this episode by Goldie Chan, who is a creative keynote speaker and author. She is a LinkedIn superstar with her creative video channel winning the LinkedIn Top Voice distinction and being called the Oprah of LinkedIn by Huffington Post, which is pretty cool to be the Oprah of anything, but especially when the Huffington Post says that about you with LinkedIn. She is the founder of an agency called Warm Robots, which is an award-winning social media strategy and creative agency based in Los Angeles. She's written for Forbes and the Archie comics, which is an amazing combination. I mean, Archie like Jughead and Veronica and all that, right?
Like the very classic Archie Americana.
Yeah. Okay. She's been featured in publications like the New York Times and Fast Company. Her first book, Personal Branding for Introverts, which is what we'll be talking about today, is coming out in October. And attendees at Pioneer's StoryConnect conference coming up in April will not only be able to get a copy of the book, but will get a chance to hear Goldie speak in person to our group as well. So Goldie, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of StoryConnect and at the conference in real life coming up in a few months.
Thank you. I'm so excited to join you at the conference. I think it'll be a really good time. I'm excited to talk more about how you can use personal branding to make sure that you stand out in your career.
And it's perfect. I'm really glad that we found you as a potential speaker. Of course, the conference is in Tacoma, Washington in April, StoryConnect.com for all the details. Because our survey that we do, and we take our survey of our attendees very seriously, last year they asked specifically for content for marketers who are introverts. And so we're like, where are we going to find a speaker like that? And then there you were. So I think it's great. I think this is a little bit of foreign language for me. Folks that know me know that I am a flaming extrovert. But I have found a lot of my relationships in my life have improved significantly since I have discovered that introverts are real and learned to understand more about how introverts operate and what they need. So I'm excited to get into a little bit about that. Let's talk just about the book. What gave you the idea, or what inspired the idea to write a book specifically on personal branding for introverts?
Yeah, so I've been writing on personal branding for a lot of my career. My column for Forbes was personal branding and storytelling in the digital age. So I think everyone expected me to do a book on personal branding. And I really thought about it and I thought, what angle, right, on personal branding do I want to take? And then I thought about introverts, and I am one. And a lot of people don't think I'm one because I speak on stages all over the world, but
Sure.
I definitely am an introvert. And I think it is so helpful for introverts to get their version of how to build their personal brand. And there's lots and lots of really great introvert books out there, but so many of them talk about introverts just being perpetually quiet. And that's their only trait. And I believe that introverts are much greater than being quiet. And Andy, I'm sure you know introverts out there who you just get them started on what they care about and they will talk your ear off.
Sure. Yeah. And like you said, a lot of folks that are, and we have a couple of very talented speakers at Pioneer and other folks in the industry that you see them on stage and you're like, wow, that person's got to be an extrovert. And they really aren't. But like you said, find the right situation and the right topic, and they're off the charts. But before we get too much into that, let's define personal brand, because obviously you are one of the experts to talk about that. But for folks that aren't as familiar, for folks used to, representing their company's brand, or, there's a lot of talk about branding out there, but how do you define personal brand and what all goes into it?
Sure. So I think the number one question that I get is what is personal branding versus reputation? So I'll define personal branding
Oh,
and
good.
reputation.
Sure.
So reputation, let's start there, is what other people say about you when you're not in the room.
Okay.
Personal branding is the story that you have control of. So personal branding is all of the elements that go into building who you're known as specifically in your career or your industry. So that's if you have it, your LinkedIn profile. It's the way you introduce yourself at a conference at StoryConnect. It's
Sure.
the way that you present yourself at your workplace if you're still physically going into a workplace. It is all of these different elements together that you have control of. That is your personal brand.
Excellent. I think that's a good definition because, like you said, you've got control over some of that, but not all of it. So that
Not
certainly
all of it.
makes sense. I think what's really interesting, it seems like from the description and some of the early talk from the book, is in some ways the world is kind of set up, particularly the marketing and business world is a little bit set up for extroverts. But I think it's important. It doesn't seem like your book is teaching people how to be somebody they're not. Authenticity is a huge deal right now. So unpack a little bit of that without giving away too much from the book. How do you suggest folks still stay true to themselves, still stay authentic, but if they are more introverted, be able to operate in an extrovert's world to some level?
Right. So I think it all goes to the very core of it. I also talk about the 5 C's of personal branding, but without going into every single one of those letters, I will start with why, which isn't even a C word, but it is the why are you building a personal brand at all? It is also hopefully the why of why you do the work that you do and the care that goes into your work and your career. And when you start from there, when you start from the purpose behind why you do your work, that is a great place to start with building your personal brand. And also, it's a great place to start from. Then you're less, I think, encouraged to be an extrovert at work. And of course, there are many extrovert traits that are very rewarded, that are very helpful at work. But there are so many introvert traits that I believe are incredibly valuable at work. For example,
Absolutely.
deep listening, right, is one of them. I'm sure you know coworkers or folks that you've worked with that are amazing at listening and hearing and digesting. And that also as a leader, I think a lot of extroverts unsurprisingly make up the majority of leaders in the workplace, but introverts as a leader also are really fascinating. They will be a team leader that really tries to help fit folks in and make sure that they're being heard during the meetings, etc. So introverts have so many strengths that they bring to the workplace, I think, and obviously so do extroverts. So I hope that introverts, anyone out there listening to this that's an introvert, I hope that you know that you bring really amazing and valuable skills to your place of work.
I'm really glad that you touched on that because so many people, whether it's leadership, but also to a degree marketing and communications, the word association there, loud, and then there are other jobs and tasks that you associate quiet, um, and the same thing with introverts and extroverts. But I'm really glad you touched on that because you don't have to be, even though some folks, we all know folks that don't quite get this, but just being loud doesn't make you a leader. There's a whole lot more to it than that, and I'm really glad you touched on that.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, being loud doesn't make you a leader. I think a lot, and I will say one of the C's of the 5 C's of personal branding to me is confidence. And I always like to reference that between confidence and ego. And ego is when you shout who you are in a room, and confidence is when you are who you are in the room, right?
I like
You
it.
don't have to yell who you are. You just show up and you're very confidently that person. And I think we have all been in rooms where we meet somebody who is very confident. And I think just as human beings, it is so attractive to be around those people because they aren't insecure, they aren't egotistical, right? The two sides of the coin, but they just show up as they are. And that's a very comfortable person to be around.
Let's talk about in that room when you've got folks that are, I mean, most every scenario, whether it's a virtual room or in an actual conference room, you've got folks, team dynamics. A lot of folks are on different parts of the continuum there, from extremely extroverted to extremely introverted. I think the book gets into some of this, but how can introverts and extroverts work together in peace and live together in an office setting? What are some key ways to work together to get to success? Because, like you said, they're all bringing, in the same way that we talk about diversity of different kinds in the workplace. Those different perspectives can lead to brighter success for everybody.
Yeah. So I've talked with a few different extrovert leaders. Once again, extroverts outnumber introverts in leadership positions. And I talked with a few folks that I know who are extroverts and how do they lead a successful team full of introverts. And a couple of ways that they do that. First of all, one of them, what he told me is he actually gave his team 1 day off meetings. So they have 1 day during the work week where they absolutely have no meetings. It's just a regular work day, but no, especially team wide meetings, no company wide meetings are going to be scheduled.
Sure.
He does this to give people a little bit of a break. I'm sure we all would appreciate a
Yeah,
day
extrovert here.
without
Sign me up for
meetings,
that. I
right?
like
Is the
that.
raise your hand. Um, and then the other person that I talked to, who was also an extrovert, was saying, okay, one of the things that she does is she runs a team full of designers. They're all introverts, they're all quiet. And what she does is she just makes sure that everyone has space to talk to her outside of actually the meeting itself. So she'll do a
Okay.
pre-meeting meeting slot where an introvert can come into her office and say, I'd really like to express this during the meeting. So if they don't feel comfortable saying it during the meeting, they will tell her first and she will bring it up as a, oh, well,
I
this
like
is
it.
just something that we should talk about. And I think that's really wonderful. And I'd never heard that before, but how helpful and powerful is that for an extrovert to do for an introvert?
Yeah, I think that's an office hours approach like that makes a ton of sense. One more question
Yeah.
about that topic before we move on to social media, but
Yeah.
I guess it's all connected. But the book also talks about navigating in-person networking events like StoryConnect,
Yes.
and I have learned that there are two words that strike fear into the heart of introverts everywhere, which is icebreaker. At the beginning of a meeting, what are some of the tips that you have learned and that you encourage folks to do when they are in person? Obviously, so much what we do now is virtual, but coming up at an event like
Right.
StoryConnect where they're going to be there in person, what are some of the strategies and ideas that you've developed over the years to navigate those in-person events?
So I will also start with two other words that strike fear in the hearts of all
Okay.
introverts, much like icebreaker is small talk.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so they're cousins. I like to say that they're cousins of each other.
sure.
Uh, both tend to be unpleasant for introverts in general. So I'll talk a little bit about both of those. But I think it's helpful when you're at a conference that you understand that you have a social battery, and that social battery as an introvert probably is going to get drained pretty quickly by being at a conference. So what do you do? Well, it's the same thing that I suggest when you work in an office, which is take 10 minutes, take 5, 10 minutes and go outside. Just step outside of the conference venue, get some fresh air, reset a little bit. Don't be also, the temptation is to go outside and immediately, right, get on your phone and start the scroll.
Sure,
But
right.
don't get on the phone. Literally go outside, take a little walk, just be offline a little bit, be off socializing, and that helps reset you a little bit. So just having that. Now, let's talk about some of the tactics though when you're at a conference that are helpful for making sure that you feel less overwhelmed. And this is true for extroverts too. One of the things that I suggest is, instead of saying, I want to meet 50 new people at this conference, which is an undoable number for most of
That's a
us.
lot. That's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. That's a lot. So I actually like to keep this number incredibly, incredibly small. I'll say
Hmm.
for me, whenever I go to a conference, the number that I have in my head is I want to meet 3 new people. And the reason why I say three is because when you meet 50 new people at a conference, what are the chances that you remember anything about those 50 people?
Nope. Yep. You're
And you
just
probably
collecting
have a
business
stack.
cards.
Yeah,
Yep.
you have, I was going to say exactly. We're on the same wavelength. You're collecting that stack of business cards and you don't even remember where you got this, why you got this, when you got this, unless you're in sales, in which point, none of this is relevant to you probably.
Right.
But I think for the rest of us who are not so great with the stack of business cards, if you talk to 3 people, just the way our brains work, you're more likely to remember those 3 people. And quite frankly, if you have, as an introvert, a more in depth conversation with those people, they will be more likely to remember you. And that's the power.
Wow, I like that a lot. Well said. And I'm making a note that when I see you in April, not to talk about the weather or how the Dodgers are doing, or that kind of small talk stuff. So
I will
we'll
say
move
this.
right
I
along.
also in my book I have like a little list of small talk questions. Sometimes I do a networking workshop at some of these bigger conferences, and I quite literally and I do them for introverts. So the last introvert session I did was introvert specific, and it was a room full of introverts. So you can guess how awkward and quiet that was. No one spoke in the line when they were waiting to get in. So,
Oh no, I couldn't do it.
but
I couldn't do it.
it yeah, it was you'd be just talking, but it was funny because they get in the room and then I say, okay, halfway through it, because I didn't want to throw them in the fire right away, but halfway through I made them do this exercise. I made them stand up and say, hi, my name is, right? And the best part is, for some of them, there was because I paired them off. They were like, hi, my name is, and then they needed me to say, no, that's where you put in your name. is
Right.
This is where we put in the name. And then you say, the person A says, hi, my name is, and then person B says, wow, it's not, or whatever. It's nice to meet you. My name is, and then we go back to person A, and person A says, that's great. Where do you work, or what do you do? And then I was
Sure.
like, that's a conversation. That's a
Yeah.
small talk conversation. And we practiced it at this session. And it was funny because people were so uncomfortable with just saying, hi, my name is. And then the other person was like, okay, what's my line again?
Right.
And I was like, that's when you say your name, my
Sure.
name is, right? Just a few words. So sometimes it's helpful for having a script when your brain goes a little fuzzy.
Sure. Definitely. Well, let's shift gears over to social media as well, because I know that's something that you also have a lot of expertise. Well, we could talk a little bit about the book at the end, but it's due out in October. It's available coming up on Amazon and I imagine other retailers as
Yep.
well. Anywhere in
Yep.
particular they should buy it, or just wherever they normally buy
Definitely
books?
buy it wherever you can buy it, but it's available at Amazon. It's available at Barnes and Noble. It's actually available online at a bunch of great local retailers that are really exciting. I think, yeah, I was going to say
And the title.
Tacoma. Yeah, there's probably quite a few local bookstores that's available, but definitely at Barnes and Nobles and definitely at Amazon.
Got it. And it's called Personal Branding for Introverts by Goldie Chan.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, switching over to social media. So obviously, the Huffington Post calling you the Oprah of LinkedIn. You've got more than 100,000 followers on there. What do you attribute your success to when it comes to that personal brand on a platform? We have seen from our surveys with our clients and everything that while some social media platforms like Facebook have kind of plateaued, still very strong. Others like X are maybe kind of sliding a little bit. LinkedIn is on the rise from everything in our industry, that more and more folks are looking at LinkedIn as a spot. So specifically on there, what do you attribute your success to over the years?
So I'll say the other nickname that I got, which I laugh at, is the Queen of Uncool, because I decided to build my
Uncool.
personal brand presence on what I like to say is the most uncool platform on the internet. But I do think, Andy, that despite it being probably the most uncool platform on the internet, it's one of the most valuable platforms on the
Sure.
internet. And to me, that's worth more, to have a place where you can reach decision makers. You can reach people who have budgets. You can reach people who are director level or above, who will be able to help you with your business or connect you with their colleagues. That is such a powerful platform. So
Sure.
I care a little bit less about it being uncool, and I care a lot more about it being a place where you can make business really happen. And I think that's why it's on the rise. More and more people are seeing LinkedIn as a place where not only can you, of course, get your next job, but you could also get your next client. But you could also get other opportunities by connecting with your old colleagues and your old clients, etc. It's where you can house your network. So when I think about Facebook, I think of extended family and friends are on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I think of Instagram, I think that's the platform where we a little bit show off, right? And
Sure.
then I'm not, quite frankly, I'm on other platforms. I'm on quite a few other platforms, but I'm not as active in them as I could be. But LinkedIn, once again, is to me so powerful and growing because, especially in what can be just a very tough job market and maybe a tough economy, it's helpful to have a platform that specifically is focused on business for better or for worse.
Right.
And I think it's a very good place to have a presence and to sign up for a profile and to build out your business page if you haven't already, because it's free.
Right. I have a good buddy that's not in the utility or broadband industry. He's in the banking industry, and I give him a hard time because his Facebook picture and his LinkedIn picture are the exact same, except LinkedIn he has on glasses, and Facebook he doesn't have on glasses. And I'm like, you're just trying to look smarter on LinkedIn. But on a serious note, there, how do you treat the content differently? Are you, it's awfully easy if you're in Hootsuite or Sprout Social, just publish the same thing on all the platforms.
Right.
But do you treat your LinkedIn content differently with a different tone, voice, strategy, plan? I mean, how do you treat the platform differently?
Yeah, so I will say if you're using those programs already, you can do tailored content and still schedule it out. So I want to throw that out there that
Right.
yes, it's easy to take the same post and then hit that publish button across platforms, which is why they build the platforms like that. But I would gently suggest that maybe a better idea is to start with a draft. That's one draft. And then to tailor that specific draft to the different platforms to make sense and speak in the language of those different platforms. I will say that for myself, when I post the same post on Instagram or quite honestly Facebook, because a lot of it is friends and family, I
Sure.
will use a lot more of a casual tone. I'll use slang, I'll use shortened words. I'll use something funnier. And on LinkedIn, because these are potential clients and potential folks that I will work with, I do a more professional and business post. I put on my virtual glasses like that guy that and I do the same thing with my copy and my content. I put the glasses that have no lenses in them. I put it on my content so it looks a little smarter. I
Right.
think that's
I mean,
also
it worked for
helpful.
the Incredible Hulk. Is we always talk about that, how the new
It worked
movies
for the
he's
Incredible
smart.
Hulk,
I
and you
mean,
know what?
sure,
It worked for Superman.
that's
So
true. That's true. Um, so I think that's great advice. One other question I had for you when it comes to social media, you're in a lot of places. You talked about how Facebook is a little bit more for for family and friends, and LinkedIn. I saw that you're also collaborating on a Spotify playlist for introverts. You've got the print publications that you're featured on your in podcasts like this. Um, it's hard to be everywhere. Maybe it's impossible to be everywhere. How do you decide? On one side you're everywhere. On one spot you do one thing really really well. Where do you kind of figure out how to decide where to be when it comes to online presence, and where to put your efforts when it comes to personal branding?
yeah, so I always like to say start with one. And this is true across the board of thinking about content or thinking about platforms. Start with a platform that makes the most sense. Where does your audience live? For example, if your audience lives on Pinterest, then you should be developing a presence on Pinterest. If your audience of decision makers lives on LinkedIn, then you should be on LinkedIn. Now, if they're on Instagram, etc. So to me, it's a very common sense first approach, which is which platform are your clients or the people that you're trying to reach? Where do they live? And that is exactly where you should try to start to build your personal brand. Now, I also think, okay, I am everywhere. And that's more of I'm just a curious person, quite frankly. And when I
Mm,
see an interesting social network, I join it. But I will say that the majority of folks, that's not a very sustainable or doable thing.
it's a
So
lot.
I honestly, for most people, I say you should be on two or three platforms tops and really try to develop out your brand over the course of 6 months to a year on those three platforms before expanding beyond that. Because what will end up happening is, and I see this all the time, you get overwhelmed. You're on too many places.
Right.
You are doing too much. And I also want to bring up, of course, what you talked about. We said, "Oh, I'm on this podcast. I'm doing this. I just partnered with a brand called Epidemic Sound to do an introvert playlist that goes along with my introvert book,
Yeah,
and
it's
I
a cool
really
idea.
like them because yeah, it's all human made music, which is a funny thing to say out loud,
Sure.
uh, but important to say. But when I'm deciding who to partner with or who to work with or what content to do, I always think, what is the main goal? So this comes back down to just thinking, what are your goals? Are your goals to grow your business? Are your goals to solidify that you are an expert in your field and in a very hyper specific either area, or that what you do for a living, say you're in marketing, that you are just the expert in marketing, or you're an expert in telecoms, right? So whatever that is for you, whatever that goal is, you need to narrow down on that goal before you take on a ton of stuff. Because
Sure.
if you do everything without a goal, then it ends up being a very muddled story. And then obviously, you won't reach the goal that you want because people won't know what it is that you want to do. And so many people out there want to help you in your network. But if it's unclear what you need help with, they can't help you.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about the difference between busy and productive, and being everywhere like that's a great way to be super busy and not very productive. So I hear what you're saying. Last thing for you as we're wrapping up here. Let's say there's somebody that's listened to this episode, and they're thinking, okay, I need to work on my personal brand. What are the first steps? What advice do you have? Maybe for an introverted person, maybe not. But what are the kind of first steps that you would say? Just your advice on the way out the door here, as to how they can get started.
Yeah, I like to keep it simple. So I like to say, start with who you're talking to first. So I try to bucket that into three categories. So is it your bosses and your clients? That's the very
Mm-hmm.
top of the funnel. The middle of the funnel is your peers. So people who are either doing your exact same role at a different place or they work in your industry vertical. Those are your peers. And then right below that would be the amazing people that are listening to this podcast. That's your general audience. So it really depends on which of these three buckets you want to speak to, and deciding which of those three buckets helps determine not only the platform that you want to go on to, but also the content that you will be making if you want to make content that speaks to that particular bucket of people.
Perfect. I think that's a good summary and a great way not to overdo it right out of the gate. I like the approach there. Goldie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
She is Goldie Chan. She is a speaker, creative, author with a book coming out in October. She will also be a speaker at StoryConnect coming up in April. We hope to see you there. Hope to give you a chance to meet Goldie in person and to hear what she has to say. We're looking forward to it. And until we talk again, keep telling your story.
StoryConnect is produced by Pioneer Utility Resources, a communications cooperative that is built to share your story. StoryConnect is engineered by Lucas Smith of Lucky Sound Studio.